So in the main event, Alex Pereira defends his UFC light heavyweight title, this time as a minus 450 favorite over challenger Khalil Rountree Jr. He's a plus 350 underdog. Jon, Rountree is a very interesting dude. He's been in the UFC since 2016. We know he's tough as nails, and he's going to need it against a guy like Pereira. Rountree has worked up to this title shot for a while. So for our viewers and listeners, please tell us a little bit about what we should know about Khalil Rountree and how he fights.
Well, he's a great human being. I was with him at the Patrick Mahomes golf tournament around the time that he got the Jamal Hill fight. And of course, that fight went away. That was going to be a big fight against the former UFC champion on a McGregor headline pay-per-view during International Fight Week. So Khalil Rountree Jr. has certainly put in the time. He has put in the right work dutifully in Thailand over the years. And of course, in Las Vegas and everywhere else. And I guess you could call it one of the more unexpected championship opportunities in UFC history. I was doing a Q&A in Perth, Western Australia, not all that long ago with former champion in this division, Jiri Prochazka, and he was sort of wondering aloud as to how this sort of happened, whether his sort of disagreement with it was cloaked or not, or he had an issue with the ranking of Rountree Jr. I don't know, but this is a guy in Rountree Jr. who at one point in time was 8-5 as an MMA pro and had lost to a journeyman type in Marcin Prachnio, and wholesale changes I think were needed just in terms of commitment in totality. And man, as a striker, as a southpaw, as a powerful individual, really excited to see what he can do with the opportunity. I mean, I bring up Jiri Prochazka's words in the context of, hey, say what you want about the relative worthiness of Khalil Rountree Jr. against guys like Bilal Muhammad and Merab Dvalishvili that couldn't be denied given the long winning streaks. But now we see what Rountree Jr. can do with it. And he's going to go for it, of that I can assure you.
Yeah, from all accounts, Rountree seems like, a really genuine, really humble, a nice guy who's been through a lot. I mean, when you see him enter the cage, Jon, does he just put on this, war horse mentality, to quote his nickname?
So I'm not squeamish, right? And anybody who watched our Sphere show saw Irene Aldana's head split open, and that was maybe the worst cut in UFC history. And that one actually made me a little bit squeamish. I think what bothers me more in terms of my relative stomach for it is when Khalil Rountree Jr. starts trying to break legs with his leg kicks. I mean, that Eric Anders fight, right? Part of the reason when Kenny Florian and I went back for our film study for UFC Fight Pass, we didn't do the Anders fight because I can't bear to watch Anders take another leg kick. Like, bro, I don't know how another man can absorb that type of punishment. So yeah, there's a definite ferocity to his strikes, and it sort of flies in the face of his disposition. He's understated, soft-spoken, kind to be sure. I mean, he's a true martial artist, but I really think that the work that a lot of these elite fighters, Valentina Shevchenko, Khalil Rountree Jr. have done in Thailand have not just given them, explosivity and confidence in their kicking game and being in a really rough training atmosphere, but sort of a confidence that they're definitely taking into the octagon. And I'm excited, I mean, say what you want about the betting odds. I'm really excited for the championship fight, and I would not say that if I did not feel so.
100%. It's been a hot minute since Poatan has faced some adversity, or even had a prolonged bout that we saw go into rounds 3, 4, and 5. An early knockout is definitely on the table in this matchup. Don't get it wrong, but with Pereira being such a high level kickboxer, and then Rountree with the Muay Thai, I mean, Jon, do you expect maybe a more cerebral chess style fight where guys go back and forth, and this fight potentially does get into rounds 3, 4, and 5?
Potentially. As you know, I try not to get too predictive as the guy calling the fights, right? I don't want people to start thinking over under 4.5 rounds or whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely the opportunity for an early finish, but I think to your point, I think both athletes historically have exercised some patience. Poatan, even though he knocks guys onto stretchers, he is never really in any sort of rush. It's all about location and getting reads and just putting that leg kick out there in his own right. And I think for Rountree Jr. as well, when you invest in all parts of the body, I don't think you're necessarily in any rush. Neither guy I think would be described as a headhunter, despite that left hook of Poatan. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a longer fight. And certainly at altitude, that's something that absolutely bears watching. And I think for Rountree Jr., as I ingest some of the film last week and this week, just a lot of weight to move around. He's just a muscled guy. And, I can even tell, right, if I'm 8 or 10 pounds thinner, it's easier to go run a 5K as slowly as I may move, So I just think sometimes even if you have the best intentions, there's only so much you can do in terms of improving your natural organic cardiovascular base or strength in one training camp. Now, if you spend a decade working on your cardiovascular base, then maybe one day you can be Merab Dvalishvili, perhaps not. But it'll be fascinating to see it go late, to see if anybody tries to shoot. But yeah, it's a good main event, Yuri. It's a good main event.
Yeah, Roundtree, man, like a bowling ball with those traps in the physique he kind of put. I want to shift, John, quickly to the co-main event. Raquel Pennington back after a razor-thin decision in Toronto, here where I'm from, to defeat Mayra Bueno Silva for the women's bantamweight strap. Now, Pennington is a minus 175 favorite over Julianna Pena, who comes back at plus 150. I see a little bit of disrespect on Pena, but John, I want to ask you about Rocky Raquel first. What are some of her skills that put her in a good position to win this fight?
Well-roundedness, right? And it sounds trite to trot that out in 2024 when you're talking about a mixed martial arts athlete, but she really can do it all. If she has to kickbox you, if she has to wrestle you, she's good in the clinch. She has submissions offensively, which you can't necessarily say about a lot of these athletes. And she knows how to not point fight, but win rounds. She's productive. She's busy. She can keep a pace. And, sometimes I think maybe the aesthetic fools you a little bit because just like, the UFC play-by-play voice, maybe we aren't blessed with a six-pack, right? But Raquel Pennington absolutely gets after it. She's methodical about her career. Holly Holm, I think, has been the only woman that has really frustrated her twice over. But she's a good 5-round fighter. She has a good style. She has a ton of experience. And in terms of the preparation, great coaches. You can be sure they dotted every I and crossed every T and box checked when it comes to the altitude and everything else. So I like the team. I like the fighter. I like the commitment. I like the stage of her career. I like the fact that her wife, Tisha Pennington, is on the fight card. She's just running into a woman who's been out for a long time and maybe the meanest woman in MMA since Ronda Rousey. So I can't wait, man. It's a great card for the women at 35, to be sure.
Yeah. Hard to forget about Julianna Pena. Of course, she hasn't fought since July 2022. Most famous, at least to newer fans like myself and some other people, for her massive underdog victory over Amanda Nunes in 2021. She's a plus 700 underdog in that fight. You mentioned she's one of the meanest women in MMA, John. Please elaborate on that, because she comes across to me sometimes as maybe not such like that.
Well, it's a compliment, and she is confrontational just like I am. There have been times where maybe she felt put off by something on broadcast, and she has no problem texting the welterweight champion Bilal Muhammad to get my number and let me know about it. And it was really just sort of a graphical disagreement there. But it is amazing to a man, her coaches, Rick Little in the Pacific Northwest and Mike Valley in Chicago. When you start to talk about Julianna Pena, it's not that she doesn't have wrestling or a good jab or cardio, but both of them lead the conversation with the meanness. And I remember Rick Little showing me gym videos back in the day. She's just a ferocious lady, sort of an ultimate competitor type who hates to lose so much that it fuels her in competition. And I do think that will can be as powerful as skill in combat sports. And she has certainly weaponized that. She can lay claim to one of the biggest singular victories in women's MMA history, to your point, against Amanda Nunes. And yeah, I can understand why people think she's a live underdog, just because she just has that just undeniable will and meanness and ferocity and never say die attitude. And I wish my daughters could spend like a week around her and then they can come home to daddy crying.
Just 1 week, that's enough. We got some chatter here. He said, John, let's be real. Julianna Pena is the female Colby Covington, and that is not a compliment.
Well, I don't know what people are looking for exactly, right? I mean, certainly if you look at Colby Covington against Robbie Lawler, offensively, that was one of the more awesome performances in UFC history. But yes, I can understand maybe control, position over submission, run and clock a little bit. I understand the sentiment. I guess for me, I think there are varying degrees of entertainment value when it comes to offensive wrestling. And even when you look at the guys that seemingly keep getting tied together, Bilal Muhammad and Merab Dvalishvili, with respect to both new champions, there were degrees of excellence and entertainment to those two fights, both amazingly excellent, but Bilal's fight was far more entertaining. So first order of business is to win, man. Nobody cares in the NBA if you win 82-78. So I know I am sort of a purist, and maybe it flies in the face of maybe what is going on in the sport, what maybe some referees are trying to do these days to affect change as far as the product that is being put out there. I know promoters, I think historically maybe like strikers, but I like dominant champions, George St. Pierre, Bilal Muhammad, or anybody else.
Gotcha. And I got to ask this, John, because when we talk about this bantamweight division, many other people, myself included, are kind of thinking about, these folks could be placeholders potentially for Kayla Harrison. She's coming, right? She's fighting on this card in Salt Lake City as a
Yeah.
minus 700 favorite over Ketlin Vieira, and a win could probably make her next. Can you, Jon, maybe just contextualize how talented Kayla Harrison is and the type of life that she brings to this division?
She's the total package. Renaissance woman, two-time Olympic judo gold medalist for the United States of America. I'll move back off the microphone. I know we got some beloved friends north of the border, but just as an orator, right? Maximizing her microphone time, taking legal custody of her niece and nephew. She just is able to take on so much. And that's why I think those people who know her were not at all surprised to see the way she attacked that first UFC weight cut to 135 pounds. She will be favored, perhaps prohibitively so, against either woman who's competing for the championship this weekend. Now, Ketlin Vieira provides an appreciable challenge, but couldn't have done much better with the UFC 300 showcase than Kayla Harrison did. She's got submissions, of course, tremendous ground control, great takedowns, great judo game. That says nothing of all the developmental strides she has made when it comes to her striking, and just a world-class elite athlete. And maybe a few years ago, you would say of which there are few in the UFC. There's so much elite talent, but few with a pedigree quite like Kayla Harrison. And, I've recently sort of talked about Israel Adesanya, and Dominic Cruz was the first to bring this up, having this sort of Michael Jordan type energy in a room. And there's just an undeniable energy about Kayla Harrison that just screams an elite athlete that has been in a lot of elite settings where athletes are treated well, Olympians, and she is ready for prime time, as you saw this summer. And we'll see what happens here at altitude at UFC 307.
Yeah, no doubt. She's the real deal, and just missed Amanda Nunes by a little bit. And boy, that would have been something.
We'll see. Money talks, right? Amanda, what's your price? What's your price? I mean, first things first, right? First things first. Raquel Pennington, Julianna Pena, Ketlin Vieira is like, come on now. But I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that with the right number that Amanda Nunes would come back. And as far as the women's game is concerned, Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison, right? It's the biggest fight you can make with respect to Zhang Weili and everybody else.
For sure. That's a pay-per-view headliner right there. Jon, before we switch gears, this guy, Jose Aldo, talking a lot about him heading into this fight. Retired, unretired, in great shape, looked very, very good against Jonathan Martinez last time around. Still a plus 130 underdog against Mario Bautista. Aldo, of course, a fan favorite, making a little bit of a run here as a gatekeeper, a guy who says kind of, not today, kid. How much do you respect a legend like Aldo for stepping in against anybody and fighting full tilt all the way through at this point in his career?
Well, and when I got the first iteration of the fight card, he was competing on the prelim. So that tells you all you need to know about this individual and what he's willing to do. Certainly the show money's pretty good, but what a comeback it was. And he was the underdog against Jonathan Martinez. Martinez had a ton of momentum, comes from a great camp. And what does Jose Aldo do? Looks like he never left in a lot of respects. Now, Mario Bautista is a different stylistic and physical challenge, right? Coming out of the MMA lab, a guy who really is primed to, I think, make a run here in this division. He's won 8 of 9. And it's a really interesting challenge for Jose Aldo at this stage of his career, given the Aljamain Sterling Movsar Evloev fight going away. This fight is now on pay-per-view on the draft that I'm looking at right now. But how much does Jose Aldo have left? I think if you look at his performance in May, it stands to reason he has a heck of a lot. Styles make fights. He has a lot of winnable moments in this fight, I think, potentially. But Mario Bautista absolutely brings it. And I think that could potentially steal the show and be an absolute war. Both guys are willing. So we're ready to go.